Superman 78 is a great reintroduction into the world of Richard Donner's Superman. The series successfully captures the spirit of Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, and Gene Hackman while also expanding on their characters and adding in some comic classics. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this throwback comic series. I'm Brennan for the New Wave Nerds. Like and subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Superman 78 is written by Robert Venditti and penciled by Wilfredo Torres and Gavin Guidry. Now, as always, we're going to begin with a brief, non-spoiler review. This series was really fun. I didn't know what to expect going into it. I had never read any of the other throwback comics before, like Batman 66, so I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I was really pleasantly surprised, especially with the first arc. I think it's really interesting. I think it's very well told. And like I said, I do think it does a good job of capturing the spirit of those original characters while also giving a few of them, specifically Lois Lane, a little bit more of an update and bringing them a little bit closer to what we see in the modern day. I think it's really, really well done. The first 6-issue arc is incredibly great. I love the villain that they introduced. He's a classic and deserves to be in a movie. The second story arc is called The Metal Curtain. This is the arc that is illustrated by Gavin Guidry, and I didn't think it was necessarily as good. It definitely felt closer to, like, say, Superman 4 in the sense that it is a very Cold War-centric story. It is Superman responding to the actions of the USSR. And so I think from a thematic standpoint, I think it does a really good job of keeping in tune with the Christopher Reeve character. There are lots of lines of dialogue in the second arc that I feel are closer to Christopher Reeve than in the first arc. But overall, the first one I do think is much better. They're both written by Robert Venditti, and the first one is illustrated by Wilfredo Torres. I think overall, though, those first 6 issues are really good. They're a great continuation of the movie. And the second issues are okay. They're not as amazing. But again, thematically, I think that they actually keep closer to the character. Now, before we get into the spoiler section of the review, I do need to politely ask you all to head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. We really enjoy making these videos, and we want to be able to make them even better. We want to be able to make them look incredible and amazing and not like they're just filmed in my living room. But we're really excited. We're doing a patron drive. If we get 15 new patrons or $50 a month, which just about covers our podcast hosting fees, then we're going to be releasing a very special 12-part series where we take a look at the classic DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, one of the most iconic storylines ever created. It changed the way comics are written. It changed the way they're perceived in the world, and we're really, really excited to talk about it. So again, if you like the work that we do here and want to help us make it even better, head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. Now, let's get into the spoiler section. I really want to talk in the beginning here about the Donner feel, if you will, which sounds a little bit awkward now that I say it out loud. But I do think this series does a good job, again, of reintroducing us to that world. It's a world where Metropolis loves Superman, where he is seen as one of them. It is a world that is very Silver Agey in how Superman acts. It's very Silver Age comics. It is great. I mean, he is the big blue Boy Scout. And I think that the writing here of Robert Venditti is really interesting. To be able to sort of meld these two things is fascinating. To bring in a Silver Age Superman from a movie from the 70s and sort of adapt it and modernize it slightly in the storytelling, but to still have it stay like it feels like it should be in the 70s, or I guess in the 80s. It is very, very well done. I love it. Superman feels like a ray of hope, a beacon of light, which is exactly what he should be. I think it's really, really good. Now, as far as the first story arc goes, there is something that I want to talk about that I like for the comic, but I don't know if I like the way that it fits into the movie universe. So the villain of this first arc, rather, is Brainiac. He's a classic Superman villain. In some continuities, he is completely alive, a regular old person who catalogs and collects things. In some continuities, he is a robot. And in most continuities, he's sort of like a merging of those. He's a bit more of an android, if you will, than merely a robot. And I think he's introduced really, really interestingly here. Like I said, I love Brainiac. He's one of the best villains, incredibly underrated. I can't believe that we haven't seen him in a movie thus far. I think there were rumors that he was going to be the second villain, or rather the villain of Man of Steel 2. I think there was another movie where it was pitched for him to be the villain. Each time they've sort of almost gotten it, but then they've backed away at the last second. And I think that's really unfortunate because, like I said, I think he's great. He's a really important character in the Superman mythos, and I think it would be really, really fun to see. Now, in Brainiac's, or rather, aboard Brainiac's ship, he has like I said, it's the classic interpretation here. He is going around the universe, cataloging the various species and quote unquote saving a portion of them from extinction so that they can be remembered in the annals of history, right? And one of these miniaturized collections that he has is the bottled city of Kandor, which longtime Superman fans will know is a classic piece of Superman history. Kandor is the capital city of Krypton. I almost said Metropolis. Kandor is the capital city of Krypton, and it is the city where Jor-El and Lara-El were residing when the planet was destroyed. So that's the thing that I like, but I don't necessarily like the way that it fits into the movie universe. We open this comic by seeing, again, the redestruction of Krypton. We see it a little bit more from Jor-El and Lara's point of view, and before the planet is destroyed, they are overtaken with like this red light, and we don't really know what happens to them for a while until we get to, say, issue 3. Or maybe it's issue 2. It might even be that early, now that I think about it. But in any case, we find out that Brainiac has been keeping the bottled city of Kandor on his ship, and it's the place where Kal-El's parents have been. Now, that's what I don't like. I sort of wish that they had just stayed dead. I think I don't really like a story in which they live. It sort of, in some ways, takes away from the impact of Superman's origin, in my opinion. I think having his parents die is really important. To me, and this is a little bit of my biases here, I'm of the opinion that Superman should be the last Kryptonian in existence. Now, I will make an exception for Supergirl, because, again, I think she's incredibly important. I love the character. I think she's great. And so, and she goes back to the 50s, right? So she's a mainstay. So I'm fine with keeping Supergirl. But apart from that, the only other Kryptonians that I will allow, or rather I will accept being alive, are General Zod and his, lieutenants or whatever. And the only reason I'll accept them is because I think it's reasonable to argue that they, were shifted into the Phantom Zone before the destruction of Krypton. And so I'm fine with having those few people be around. But in a lot of the comics, and especially in the Silver Age, there were Kryptonians aplenty. It was like every couple issues you would meet a new Kryptonian. And I don't really like that. If you're going to use the Bottle City of Kandor in this, I am fine with that. Like I said, I really enjoy that concept. It is a large part of All-Star Superman, a comic which I really love. But I don't think Jor-El and Lara should be in the Bottled City. I think they should have blown up with the planet. Now, I understand why you would bring them back for this, because you want him to have that connection. You need to sort of have the push and pull between Earth and Krypton, a man of two worlds trying to decide where he fits in. And of course, having Jor-El there, it's an easy out for how does Superman escape, because Jor-El is obviously incredibly, incredibly intelligent. I think the bottled city of Kandor, I love it. I'm fine with it happening, but again, I just don't know if Jor-El should be there. I think it's a fundamental aspect of the character that he has lost his birth parents, and his accepted parents are Ma and Pa Kent, one of which is now dead. I do think they have some good interactions between them, though, where Christopher Reeve, Superman, is talking to Marlon Brando. He's talking to Jor-El, and he's discussing the Kents and how they had such a big impact on his life and how they made it worth living and how they, made him into the man he is today. There are some good interactions there. But yeah, by and large, I don't know if they should be in the bottled city. But apart from that, I think it's, again, despite the fact that I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the way that it's put into practice, as a concept, I really, really enjoy it. And narratively, I do think it works. Now, the other aspect of this first story arc that I kind of want to talk about is the Luthor angle, right? What is Lex Luthor up to? He, again, is sort of keeping in tune with the Gene Hackman Lex Luthor from Richard Donner's original movie. He is not really a businessman. He is just a mad scientist. He's a weird, crazy person who wants to prove that he is the smartest person on Earth, that he is the greatest criminal mastermind. And so he sort of, quote unquote, helps Superman here, but strictly in an attempt to prove that he's smarter than Brainiac. I think that's really fun. Again, I'm not super into this version of Lex Luthor just because it's not the type of character that I like to see. I much prefer him being cold and calculated, a tactician, a strategist, an engineer. I think all that's really, really fun to me. But it is interesting to see him like play off Brainiac, and purely for his ginormous ego. It's great. And it's one of those things where I think this book is written so well for everybody that when I'm reading it in the voice of the actors and actress. And it really fits. It really does fit. Everything that Luthor does in this book is something that I feel like he would have done in like Superman 5 or whatever. It all fits, and I think it's really, really interesting. Now I think I'm going to transition a little bit to talking about the second story arc, the Metal Curtain, which is one that I wasn't necessarily as much of a fan. I think it is interesting. It's a reimagining of Metallo here, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, Metallo is a villain who I haven't necessarily read a whole bunch of, but is really interesting to me. I would like to see more. I feel like he has the potential to be a really, really great Superman villain. But like I said, I just haven't read that much with him. And what I have read has sort of been a little bit lackluster. But as a concept, I really like Metallo. And the way that they introduce him in this is pretty cool as far as like this universe goes. So Lex Luthor, again, we are in the spoiler section here. Lex Luthor creates his iconic power suit, right? The one that we see in all kinds of comics. It's big, it's bulky. Now, in the mainline continuity, it's green and purple because Lex wears it himself. In this, it's just like the color of steel. There's no finish to it. And he sells it to the Soviets because he can't power it. It takes too much power, and so he just sort of abandons it, sells it to them, and is like, have fun, guys. But he doesn't realize that they have their own chunk of kryptonite, which generates enough power to make the suit work. And so they put the kryptonite into the center of it. They put the suit on a random soldier, and he is used as a foil for Superman. I think it's really interesting. I do think it's fun. I like that we get to see this guy, Metallo. I like that we see his like descent. It's only 6 issues long, so it's a relatively short arc. But we get to see him sort of fall into madness as his mind is slowly overtaken by the kryptonite, and sort of the radiation causes him to go slightly crazy. I do think it's interesting. Like I said, it's classic like Cold War propaganda. You know, it really fits into that. And so if you're, a fan of those types of stories, then I think it's really good. But if you're just looking at it from like a more objective narrative point of view, then it does feel a little bit, it's not quite as subtle as one would like. But again, Christopher Reeve's Superman comes in here and is incredibly, compassionate. And he is always trying to be like, hey, buddy, lay down, turn off the suit. We don't have to fight. We're all part of the same team here. We all want the same things. We all want the betterment of life on this planet, and so on and so forth. And I think it's really well done. Like I said, I don't know if this one is necessarily as well written as the first story arc. I don't know if it necessarily holds up as well. This one feels much more dated than the first arc does, even though it was written in like 2023 or something like that. The comic series, 2024. The comic series itself is really recent, but because of the fact that it's of the subject matter, it feels very dated in a way that the original Superman 78 comic feels dated insofar as it's like Silver Agey, but like I mentioned, it feels like a modernization of that. The Metal Curtain kind of doesn't really feel like it. I don't think it's necessarily written as strong, but I do think that this series gets at the heart of Christopher Reeve's Superman a little bit better than the first one, because again, in the second arc, Christopher Reeve, I keep calling him that, Superman, is incredibly compassionate. He's always trying to look out for what's best and to do what's right, and I think that really hits home with the 78 Superman. There are things that happen in the first story arc where I don't really feel mesh that well. Lots of things do, but like, for example, the main function of the story is that Clark gives himself up to Brainiac to save Earth, and because of that, he gets shrunk down in the bottle city of Kandor, and then for a while, he is like, just sort of accepting his fate at being stuck on Krypton. And honestly, that didn't quite feel like something that Christopher Reeve would do. But in the second arc, in the Metal Curtain, it did feel like things he would do. And I think it's a testament, again, to an understanding of the character. I don't know this for a fact, but it definitely seems to me like Robert Venditti saw Superman, the movie, at a relatively young age and really came to love it. Love the movie, love the character. If I had to guess, I would say, if Superman 78 is like your favorite thing, it's probably your introduction to Superman, and so obviously it holds, a high level of regard for you. And I definitely get that sense from Robert Venditti. I do think it's really well written. I do like a lot of Venditti's stuff. There are a few story arcs that I'm not necessarily as huge a fan of. I don't know. No, I'm not going to say that because I haven't read necessarily all that much, and it's tough. I was going to talk about Robert Venditti's run on Green Lantern, but I haven't read much of it, and also it's just tough following Jeff Johns, right, who wrote the best Green Lantern run of all time. But that's not what this podcast is about. To hear more about Green Lantern, you're going to have to wait until July 3rd when I'll be doing a very special episode, so stay tuned for that. But as for this episode, I think that's probably where we're going to leave it. Again, I think this is a good comic. I would say the first arc is certainly good, certainly worth picking up. And if you're a completionist, pick up the second arc. It's not that bad. They've both been collected in trades. And I think that they are pretty fun. They're pretty fun, and they're all relatively short. Now, let's see, what else do we have on the calendar here? Next Tuesday, the first Thursday, or rather the first Tuesday of June, we're going to be taking a look at Superman Returns with Brandon Routh, and then we will be, wow, that was a big stutter. And then on the 5th, that is the next Thursday, I'm going to be reviewing the very first story arc of the current Superman run, Superman Volume 1, Supercorp, which is written by Joshua Williamson and illustrated by Jamal Campbell. I've read those, I think like 2 or 3 times now, but when I was reading them before, it was like just background research to read other stuff. It was probably for my review of the Superwoman special, if I had to guess. But in any case, I'm excited to go back and take a look at it now and really pay attention to this story arc itself rather than how this function serves the present day. So I'm really excited. I'm going to have lots of thoughts. Summer of Superman is here, baby. We are all in, getting ready for the new movie. Let me know down below if you are excited for the new Superman movie. Make sure that you like and subscribe for more nerd content and commentary. Hit the notifications bell so that you never miss another episode. And I will see you guys on Tuesday to talk more Superman.